Clive, what's the situation?
You're late! Get in trouble!
What?
The Imperials are on his tail! We have to get to him before they do.
Understood. I'm here to even the odds. Any objections?
The Duchy of Rosaria is no more. During the assault on Phoenix Gate, the Duke and his sons are killed in a battle between Phoenix, whose dominant is Crown Prince Joshua, and a mysterious second Icon of Fire. Somehow Joshua's elder brother, Clive, survives, but is drafted into the Imperial army by his traitorous mother, enslaved, and branded. 13 years later, Clive finally sees his chance to escape and hunt down the monster who killed his brother. Along the way, he'll meet friends new and old, reckon with his past, and discover the dark truths of Valisthea. We've had high expectations for Final Fantasy XVI, and after putting over 80 hours in, completing the main story, all side quests and activities, and even starting New Game Plus, we can confidently say that Final Fantasy XVI is not only a fantastic Final Fantasy game, not only a touching tale of love and responsibility, not only a fast and fluid action game, but quite possibly one of the greatest games ever made.
This bodes well.
I'll be a first.
Final Fantasy XVI revolves around Clive, taking place in 3 distinct periods of his life: his teens, 20s, and 30s. While the game begins in his teens, the majority of the experience takes place in his 30s. In fact, you don't even unlock the majority of non-combat game mechanics till about 10 hours in. However, we would recommend you really savor the experience by exploring Valisthea, completing all the side quests, and even reading lore entries as you unlock them by holding down the touchpad or speaking to a certain NPC in your home base. This is a game that begs you to explore its depths, both in battle and out. This is the first mainline Final Fantasy game to be entirely action-focused, and combat here is incredibly satisfying. Clive can perform a 4-hit combo by tapping square, but you can follow each hit with a magic burst by tapping triangle immediately after square. This serves as the basis of combat, giving everything a nice rhythm to it. Pressing triangle on its own will fire ranged spells, so you can always keep up the assault no matter when you are on the battlefield. You can hold and release square or triangle for a powerful flaming sword swing, or the next tier of spell, and press square and X at the same time to lunge forward on the ground or thrust out in the air. After a certain part in the story, Clive's childhood dog Torgal will join the party, giving you access to 3 commands at all times using the D-pad. Up is Sick, his basic attack. Down is Ravage, which will have the good boy launch an enemy into the air or back down to the ground. And finally, Right will have him Howl and cast Cure, regenerating the gray portion of Clive's HP over time. You'll obviously want to heal when you take damage to recover at least a little bit of health, but you actually don't want to be using Sick or Ravage willy-nilly. Instead, Torgal can perform a precision Sick or Ravage by pressing the button immediately after a combo or ability. This will do a lot more damage than normal and adds to that rhythmic feeling of combat. All of those moves are available to Clive no matter what icon he's channeling. Icons are powerful, magical beings akin to gods, with one of each element inhabiting Valisthea. These icons inhabit dominants, who control their power and are able to cast magic without a crystal, much like bearers or branded, but can also take on their forms. Clive eventually gains the power of icons so he can go toe-to-toe with them. While Clive can only equip 3 icons at a time in battle, you'll be able to swap out channeled icons whenever you'd like once you have their power. Each icon comes with their own set of abilities. You begin with Phoenix, and pressing circle will activate its feat, allowing Clive to teleport towards the targeted enemy. Pressing square while teleporting will follow this up with a sword slash, while triangle will activate a magic burst. You cannot change an icon's feat, but you can choose what iconic abilities you can use while the icon is equipped. Access through the abilities menu, icons come with 3 abilities, of which you can assign only 2 at a time. For example, with Phoenix, I like to use its Rising Flame move for multi-hit damage and Heat Wave for ranged and close-up damage as well as projectile counters. In the abilities menu, you can also upgrade and master these abilities as well as feats. Mastered abilities can be equipped to any icon, allowing you to mix and match feats and abilities as you like. This system encourages creativity, and you can pull off some amazing combos. For example, in large groups of enemies, I like to use Shiva's Mesmerize to draw several of them into close range, then Garuda's Wicked Wheel to launch them all into the air, and finally Titan's Upheaval to come crashing back down to Earth, dealing massive damage to anyone caught in the blast. It's incredibly simple and satisfying, but you could extend the combo even further with Garuda's Gouge, or normal attacks midair. Throw in magic bursts, Torgal attacks, precise dodges and counters, as well as parries to slow down time, and every battle will keep you engaged and pressing buttons with both your hands at all times. In certain battles, you may also be asked to perform cinematic attacks or cinematic evasions. These are essentially quick-time events, though they only use square or R1 respectively. Succeeding will deal damage to your foe, while failing will cause you to take damage, though I don't believe they can kill you. These serve to transition between phases in a boss battle with some cool flourish, and while they were pretty common near the start of the game, they appear less often as you go, save for the first phase of the final boss, which is entirely QTEs. We don't particularly like QTEs, and turn them off in most games we can, especially the mashing ones, but they're fine here. They're inoffensive at worst and provide some incredibly cool spectacle at best, such as the aforementioned final boss phase. Normally, you'll be prompted on which button to press or mash on screen with a timer, but in Final Fantasy difficulty, accessed through New Game Plus, these prompts are no longer displayed, and you need to look at what color particles flash to tell. Red for R1, blue for square, and yellow for mashing square. If this all sounds a bit too complicated or cumbersome, you can automate aspects of combat individually by equipping the timely accessories. These will come equipped if you begin on story mode difficulty, but you still have access to them immediately on action mode, which is what we played on. You have 3 accessory slots and 5 timely accessories to pick up and choose from. The Ring of Timely Evasion will have Clive automatically dodge if it's possible for you to avoid the attack at that moment, while the Ring of Timely Focus will freeze time when you're about to get hit for a moment, allowing you to still control evasion with a bit more time to react. The Ring of Timely Strikes will have Clive perform complex combos simply by tapping square repeatedly, including all of Torgal's follow-ups. If you want to automate Torgal instead, the Ring of Timely Assistance is for you. Finally, the Ring of Timely Healing will have Clive automatically consume a potion upon reaching a certain HP threshold. Useful if you don't want to swap D-pad menus by pressing left, or go into the menu to use a specific consumable. In addition to the Timely set, Final Fantasy XVI also allows players to adjust the size of subtitles, add an opaque background to them, enable closed captions, toggle between graphics and performance mode for 30 and 60 FPS respectively, and turn on a sound visualizer. While the timely accessories are a great accessibility option, we do have to say the game is sorely lacking in that department. You can't turn off button mashing or QTEs, increase the font size in menus, which is almost Xenoblade X levels of small, or anything else we've come to expect. I can understand wanting to preserve the experience for all players, but as it is, this just excludes individuals with certain struggles. They deserve to be able to enjoy 16 too, and I hope more options are added in the future. Going back to the visual options, we would highly recommend sticking with performance mode if you really want to go all in on the combat system like we did. The game is gorgeous regardless, and we find 30 FPS makes timing magic bursts and precision 6 just a bit harder than it is at 60. Performance mode isn't perfect either, however, and prior to launch it was common to see the game dip in towns. Our untrained eyes could certainly see when the game would hit 60 in combat in certain cutscenes, but we never really had a problem with the frame rate. It just needs a bit of shoring up to stay buttery smooth at all times, and that seems to be what's coming in a pre-launch patch. Of course, the game isn't all combat. Over the course of the story, you'll be able to explore each of Valicia's surviving 4 countries. In contrast to the stages, dungeons, these open areas leave you freely to explore, battle enemies, shop, and take on quests at your leisure. You can go on foot and Clive will begin to sprint after a time, akin to DMC4's sprint ability, and eventually you'll get your own chocobo to ride around. You do need to fast travel between major areas as the game isn't open world, which does work to its benefit, but loading times are 4 seconds at maximum, so this is a non-issue. Side quests not only expound on the lore and characters, with some of their story's conclusion in these quests, but can also unlock new features. Any side quest with a plus is immediately worth doing, as this is how you gain access to chocobos, new weapons and items, and more. Out in the world you may encounter notorious marks, strong foes you can defeat for crafting items, renown, experience points, and ability points. Nectar, the Hideaway's resident Moogle, keeps track of all the beasties you can slay, so make sure to check back often. The Hideaway is your base of operations, and changes as the story progresses. You begin with the item and blacksmith shops as well as Orchestrion to select the background music, but over time unlock a training mode, arcade score attack style replays of stages, special combat challenges for each icons, the aforementioned hunt board, a list of all available side quests in the world, rewards for raising renown, a garden, Clive's quarters, Mid's workshop, and more. You'll become intimately familiar with it and your gang of fellow outlaws who live there, like Tarja, Jill, Sid, Karen, Blackthorn, Gav, and even more minor characters like the love-struck Asta have stories of their own you can check in on occasionally. Aside from 2 trophies we're still working on, we fully completed the game both because we were having so much fun and because we wanted to see how everyone's stories turned out. We're not going to talk a whole lot about the story because it's excellent and continually one-ups itself every few hours with epic icon battles. We do have a few issues with it, however, especially with how Jill is handled. She's a big player for the majority of the game, but we feel like we didn't get to know her as well as we should have by the end, especially since she's shoved to the side for the climax. The story is squarely about Clive, but with this and 15's treatment of women, it feels like the series is becoming a bit of a boys' club. We like Jill and the rest of the female cast a lot, and it feels like a missed opportunity to not explore them further. We also have to say we're mixed on the ending. It gets pretty trope heavy towards the finale, but we feel like it earns it after a story filled with political intrigue and character drama. Our issues crop up with how it handles the conclusions to Clive's story in particular. He's a very self-sacrificing person, putting other people's needs before his own, often to his detriment. Jill and Clive actually talk about this in a touching moment, but there's no real payoff for this interaction. That does play into the themes of what happens, which is very interesting, but we guess we're just trying to sort out all of our feelings about it, even a week after rolling credits. Still, this is all about the journey, not the destination, and what a journey it is. The world of Valicia is gorgeous, dark, and interesting. While it is overwhelmingly white, with not a single character of color to be found, there is technically a story reason for that, and we would rather lift up voices more qualified to talk about that particular subject, even if we're still very disappointed in Square Enix for releasing a game with no melanin. There's even a desert area, but the most you'll see are people with tans. We digress, however.
And you have His Majesty's answer.
And this is truly a beautiful game even in performance mode. We counted exactly 2 pre-rendered cutscenes, though we could have missed some, and even those look exactly like cutscenes aside from Clive's equipped sword changing. There is a noticeable difference between cutscenes and gameplay, but mostly in the form of more complex shadows, which is a good sacrifice for visual clarity. We adore the character designs, especially Clive, Jill, and Mid, but the environments really steal the show. You'll explore all types of areas like dense forests, fallen temples, an erupting volcano with complementary spooky graveyard, and plenty of castles. The texture work, modeling, and particle effects are incredibly impressive, and this really feels like a game that brings us into the next gen.
Muthos is here. Very well, it shall be so.
Icon versus Icon battles are especially a highlight. These fights essentially take the normal combat and turn it up to 11 as you inhabit an Icon. You're the size of a building, but fight with grace and animal ferocity against enemies the size of mountains. There aren't many of these battles, but they're always a joy to play. The confrontation with Titan is probably our favorite of the bunch to play, but Bahamut wins out in terms of sheer spectacle. However, there is a battle early on which presents the greatest button prompt ever in a video game, which we will leave you to discover.
Let the flames burn within you. No. Let them burn without.
The voice talent is really what steals the show here, however. Ben Starr puts his all into his performance of Clive, and even just remembering certain moments from the story gives us chills with just how good he is. Don't get me wrong, everyone else is fantastic too, but Starr is on another level of acting here and gives so much depth to the character.
Murderer. I'll kill you! I'll fucking kill you!
Starr perfectly portrays his tough front, but soft, kind, and emotional interior. Clive begins as an emotionally broken man, only able to open up to Jill, but grows into a confident man able to empathize with anyone while still protecting the people he loves. He's a great example of healthy masculinity, and though he still has his character flaws, he's instantly become our favorite Final Fantasy protagonist, or maybe tied with Terra. If Ben Starr isn't taking home all the awards this year, we may riot. The sound design is likewise incredibly impressive. It feels like every detail was accounted for, from the sounds of Clive's leather squeaking as he moves, to different footsteps and echoes depending on where you are. We did notice a few missing sound effects closer to the end, but that was in a single cutscene, and the rest of the game is a triumph in sound design. The non-diegetic sounds also serve as great cues in combat for when you can magic burst or precision sick, both emphasized by some healthy hit stop. As expected by the master composer, Soken's soundtrack is truly incredible. This man is at the absolute pinnacle of his craft, with songs ranging from classical piano pieces, grand choirs singing in Latin, and even electronic pieces. There's leitmotifs everywhere too, some from other games in the series, but others used to represent each character in 16. For example, Clive's theme can be heard in both the battle and boss themes, and clashes with other characters' themes in Icon battles. Every single song is excellent, and serves to connect the music with both the story and the gameplay. Final Fantasy is always reinventing itself on the cutting edge. It can be turn-based battles to real-time action or anything in between, and it all serves to tell a unique story with complex characters. Final Fantasy XVI is no different, yet it brings the series back to the forefront of the collective pop culture consciousness. It is both a reinvention of itself and a return to form. It soars above any and all expectations, with surprises around every corner. For the first time since arguably the original PlayStation with the 7th entry, Final Fantasy is a must-play.
However hard it gets, I'll never let you down.
With all that in mind, Gaming Trend has awarded Final Fantasy XVI a score of 100 out of 100. To summarize, Final Fantasy XVI features excellent action combat and an intricate story, both with incredible depth. It combines gameplay, story, sound, and music together in one form, all inextricably linked. It sets a new standard for action RPGs, and is quite possibly the pinnacle of the series.